Hey there, virtual students. So I'm putting this video together really quick to help you understand the phylogenetic tree mini project, because I realized that I didn't give you good enough instructions on how it might vary for you being virtual, but also too, my explanation in class is much more detailed than the instructions that I've given you. So I would rather talk you through this than try and write it down and then have you interpret what I wrote. So that's what I'm doing right here. I'm going to go ahead and explain this because this is a two-part project, and you need to do the first part in order to do the second part, which is the final week of our learning for this year. So anyways, I'm going to shrink my face down so I'm less prevalent. You can see I shaved. Okay, let's talk about the sticky note phylogenetic tree. So this last week, what I've done is the last 2 weeks, really, what I did was I went around and I created the first sticky note here that you're seeing on the screen. So hopefully you can see me moving my mouse around there. Okay, so anyways, I drew this one. This is Daddy Rex here. And Daddy Rex is the common ancestor, the original dinosaur ancestor, the great granddad of every single thing living on this board. So everything that came after him, he's the grandfather of. You can see by the end, we have a bunch of different species of animals. Even though these are all different species, great times 100 granddad is right there. So this is what we mean by a common ancestor. And what I did was I gave student number 1 this note card, and I told them to copy it exactly the best they could. And then I took my note card away, my drawing away, and I put it somewhere else. And then I used that student drawing and I went and gave it to another student and said, copy this the best you can. So then I had this one. So then I gave this one to the next student and had them try and copy down this picture the best they could. That gave me this picture, and so on and so forth. And at different times, I decided that I wanted to make a split. So basically something occurred and the species split into 2 separate lineages and 2 separate species lines, essentially. So I just randomly picked those. I picked one right after the first generation. So there's actually 2 splits. There's the original one that we did, and then I did another one straight from Granddad Daddy Rex here. So there's a split there. So there's also a split here. I believe this is Gen 2. So this is Gen 1, Gen 2, so this is Gen 3. So there was a split from Gen 2 into that one and into that one. And I did that because this very drastically changed from one to the other. So I wanted to kind of see what another group might do if we stayed closer to the original drawing, right? So I did a split here, and then I did a split here. Oops. That was weird. Why did it do that? I have no idea. So then there was a split here. And down here on the bottom line, the one that started from the greens, there was a split right here. So he was the common ancestor for this line and for this line. And you can see down here, we get really drastically different from the original all the way up here. Okay. So what you're doing on this project is writing down. So part number 1 is to write down your thoughts. You're looking for patterns. You're writing down what you think might be going on. Now, not based on the drawing in terms of like, oh, well, I bet you this student just had a shaky hand. And that's not what I'm asking. Try and think of like an actual scenario that could occur that would cause that creature to change into the other one. Maybe the food sources changed. Maybe there was a caloric restriction on the region that it was living in. Maybe they moved into another area. So then there was a split between the species because now they're evolving in 2 separate areas, right? So I want you to think of it in that sense. Write down what you're seeing. What are you noticing? So for instance, when I go to this first line, I notice that Daddy Rex has a square head and he's big, giant T-Rex, right? Got the T-Rex arms and everything else. Well, the very next one gets a little bit smaller, and his legs get a little less beefy. And then by the next one, that arm gets really small and he shrinks in size quite drastically. You notice that the stripings are getting smaller and moving further down his back. And then there's a really big difference between the next generation and that generation, in that we start getting more rounded features. The neck starts to shrink. Instead of stripes, it's now become a small sail on the back for some reason. I don't know why that shift happened. And the arm continues to get smaller. In fact, as you look over time, the arm eventually, it keeps getting smaller and smaller until it disappears entirely. So that's what I mean by looking for patterns. What are you noticing is slowly starting to happen with this creature? Then comes the fun part where you get to think about it. Like, well, why would an animal suddenly display a sail on the back? What is the purpose of a sail on the back of an animal? There's always a use for whatever's happening, right? Why would it be getting rounder over time instead of less angular? Why would that neck slowly disappear? There's a lot of questions you can start asking yourself, and this is what I mean by a free writing. You're sitting here thinking about these different genetic lines, and you're trying to figure out, like, why would this have happened? Okay, so that's part one. You're free writing. Part two, you don't have to do because you're not with a group of students. So you're at home alone working on this. So in that case, just skip through this, because this is just us taking all of our random thoughts and getting rid of the ones that aren't that great and coming down to fewer, more accurate things. And that's kind of what we're doing in the group work, is just trying to figure out, okay, who had good ideas here? What makes sense in the group? Okay, you don't get that. Sorry. That gets you then to part number 4. Now, part number 3 is me discussing it with the whole class. You're getting what I basically give the students in class. I walk them through the whole first top line and explain what I mean by all of these things and what to look for. So then they get to the story part. And the story part is creating a fictional story, because we know obviously this is a fictional scenario. You're writing a story about the original creature on the board, Daddy Rex, and what happened to his family over time. So you have to explain what happened here. You have to explain what happened here, 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 all the way down, and both of those splits. So you're explaining the whole tree. So maybe you think that the top one, it looks like he's getting more rounded features and the sail on his back and losing his 4 limbs because he's slowly transitioning into an aquatic environment, and it makes him easier to get around and catch fish and things like that. That happened with whales. Whales used to be 4-legged creatures. Well, you can still see in some whales, the hind legs, there's a vestigial couple of bones still left that aren't attached to anything. And if you actually go back further in the fossil record, you can watch these 4-legged creatures slowly transition into what whales are today. And totally accidentally, this is what students did on this top one, it looks like, is that this slowly transitioned into a sea creature, maybe. I could totally be wrong. Maybe it's slowly transitioning into some sort of an underground burrowing creature, and the loss of limbs is helping it move through the burrows more easily or something like that, right? That's for you to start thinking about, and that's what you're doing in your story, is you're narrating what happened. This doesn't need to be a 50-page long story. This can be fairly short, like 1 or 2 pages. Just be thorough and kind of explain what happened and why. Okay, so then next week, after you've learned all of this new stuff, sorry for that, all of this new stuff about why things evolve, why things adapt and change over time, there's a bunch of different reasons. Then you're going to go back and take a look at the phylogenetic tree assignment that you did, your story, and you're going to go through this process again. So you're going to kind of free write now that you have new knowledge in your brain about evolution that you're getting from all these ed puzzles and things that you're doing. Well, now that that new information's in here, you're going to go back and look at the phylogenetic tree again, do another free write. What do you know now that has changed that changes your perspective on this phylogenetic tree? Write all that stuff down. Then again, you're going to skip part 2 and 3, and you're going to go straight to part 4, which is writing your story. You already have a story written at this point, right? It's part 2. So go back to part 1, copy paste your story in here, and change it with your new information. Because maybe you thought the very bottom line here of the phylogenetic tree, maybe you thought that there was some sort of an interference with, say, aliens, and they came down and injected one of these, and that's why it eventually ended up looking like an alien at the end, right? Okay, well, Obviously, that wasn't true. So now go back and use your knowledge that you gained this last week and change your story in a more scientifically accurate manner. Does that make sense? I hope it does. So anyways, that's what you are essentially doing now for the first part of this, is going through that process, do free writing, write your story. Then this week, go through and learn about evolution and how it works in the different scenarios to set it up, and then go fix your stuff. And that's how we're finishing out the year. This is your last grade for the year, this phylogenetic tree part 2. So, there you go. Fun stuff. Once you got that done, you're done for the year. So if you want to get all of this knocked out this week, you can be done with school, or at least with science, early this year. Okay. If you have any questions whatsoever, even if it's trying to understand this assignment a little bit better, feel free to email me. I'm just grading this week. I'm not creating anything new because I've already got all the lesson plans loaded up and everything else. So I'm here to help you, and I'll be much more available this week than in normal weeks. So yeah, reach out to me if you need help, if you need me to explain this any better. And other than that, my virtual Braves, I will catch you later.